What's going on, guys? In this tutorial I'm going to walk you through how to use the Watercolor Sketch Photoshop Effect. So here's an example of what the tool will create for you. I'll show you a few more examples and then we'll get into it. If you want to see more examples, just check out the link below. Alright, I'll close these down and let's get into it. Alright, this is the photo I'll be using for the tutorial. If you want to follow along with this photo, I'll have a link to it below. So when you've opened up your photo, the first thing we need to do is load up the brushes, the patterns, and the Photoshop action for this all to work. So the easiest way to do that is just to go to File, Open, navigate to where you downloaded the Watercolor Sketch Photo Effect, and firstly we will load up the Photoshop action. So this ATN file here, just double click on that, and it will appear in your Actions panel. So you might have it here, this play icon, or if you've got a window Actions, it'll pop up here. So there is a folder. So we'll come back to that in a sec. The next thing we need to do is load up the brushes. So again, File, Open. Go inside this folder here, brushes must be loaded into Photoshop. Just double click on the brushes file. So if you go to Window, Brushes, it will appear in a folder here. So if you open this folder, there are 3 subfolders. The 2 that we're interested in using are these top 2, so you can expand those, leave those open for the moment. And next we need to load the patterns. So just go to File, Open, navigate to the Patterns folder here, and just double click on that. And if you go to Window, Patterns, it will appear here inside a folder. So after you've loaded all the required files, you want to open the Actions panel again. So click on this icon. Open the Watercolor Sketch by Sevenstyles folder. And the action, the one that you want to play is this top one here. It's called Play Watercolor Sketch. These 3 I'll explain after we've run the action, and none of these you need to touch. These are sort of all the actions that I needed to create to build the effect. So what you want to do is just select the Play Watercolor Sketch and click the play button. And the very first thing that pops up is just a message about checking the size of your image. So what you want to do here is just click Continue, right? And the image size window will pop up. So what you want to do is take the longest dimension, whether it's the width or the height, and you want to set this to anywhere, say between 4,000 to 6,000 pixels. I think that gives the best results. So I'm just going to increase this to about, say, 4,500. And when you've done that, just click OK, and that's all you need to do. So the action from here will take around 2 to 3 minutes to play back. So I'll just skip ahead and get to the result. Alright, so after the action is finished playing back, you'll get this message pop up, and that's just explaining what the next steps are to do, or basically how to reveal your watercolor. So all you want to do here is click Continue, and I'm just going to collapse the Actions panel for the moment. We'll come back to that soon. So what you will notice when the action's finished is that your canvas is blank, and that is because you need to start brushing to reveal your watercolor. So you'll notice that this layer here in purple is selected. It's called Reveal Watercolor, and I'm going to break to press Y. But the brush is already selected for you, so all you need to do is start clicking around your canvas, and that will reveal your image. Okay, so if you want to increase the area that your brush fills, you can adjust this setting up the top here, change it to say 500. So when you start brushing, that will increase the area that you fill. Or you can also increase the size of your brush. So using the left and right square brackets, you can increase the size of your brush that way, so I can fill in this top area much faster. Now what you'll notice is while you're revealing your watercolor is that there are areas where this first layer here, it won't fill in. So you can see around this chair here that it's all white, and around the frame of this picture here, it's all white. No, even though I'm brushing over the top. That is because your watercolor is revealed over 3 different layers here, and it's these 3 layers in purple. So you've got 1, reveal watercolor, 2, and 3. And you will notice on watercolor 1, if I click on this mask and hold down Alt or Option, then click on the mask, I can view the mask. you can see that the areas in black is where you will not be filling in. So whatever is not filled in, you can then reveal on the layer below. So I can select this layer, press Y to access the reveal brush, and then start brushing again, and then that will continue to fill in those areas. So the reason why I've done it this way is that there might be areas of your watercolor that you prefer to have, you know, a more of an emptier area. So like the back of the chair here, you might prefer that that's left in white, and everywhere around it you can use this layer below to fill in. And don't forget to change the size of your area if you just want to target sort of a smaller zone where you're brushing. Okay, and if you want to focus more on the details, revealing sort of the finer details of your watercolor, use a small brush. So go down to, say, you know, as low as 10 pixels or somewhere around there, and then start brushing, and that will give a bit more of an accurate representation of the underlying image. So I can brush there, and then you've got the one below. Actually, before we go there, I'll look at this number 2 again, and if I go inside the mask here by holding down Alt or Option and clicking on it, you can see the areas in black is where this layer won't reveal, and that will fall down onto this one below. So selecting this last layer here, I'll press Y. I can continue to brush around, and that will basically just fill in the remaining areas where you didn't fill in from the 2 layers above. Okay. Now, if you want to access the reveal brush at any time, just hit B, then right click anywhere over your canvas, and that will bring up the brushes panel. So this first brush inside the Watercolor Sketch Reveal Brushes folder, this is the one that you want to use to reveal your watercolor. So at any time you need to access it, you can either hit Y or just click on that there, and that will get it. Okay, now let's have a look at if you go back into the brushes panel here, we have this folder called Blend Brushes. And I've created this so that we can create sort of some custom shapes to the look of the edges of our watercolor. So you can see this is kind of the shape that the reveal brush creates for us, right? I'll just undo that actually. So this part here is I want to create a different kind of a look to that. So what you can do is firstly just identify the layer that you revealed that section. So it's this one, number 1. And I'm going to right click and just grab one of these brushes here. And now when I start brushing over this section, I can start smudging this watercolor around. And you can do that anywhere, okay? So you can just, smudge away. So you can see this area here, that must be coming from this layer here. So I can select this layer, and maybe I'll grab this one, and I can just smudge that around to create different kinds of looks. Alright, so I might just smudge this watercolor here on the chair a bit. So I'll right click, and let's just grab this one. Don't forget to use the left and right square brackets to adjust the size of your brush, and just sort of smudge that around. Now if you smudge or reveal an area of your watercolor that you decide you don't want, just hit E to bring out the eraser tool and just brush that away. And you can see how that's created like a smooth gradient, which I don't want. So I can just hit B again, grab one of these smudging brushes, and then just sort of brush over that section again if I wanted. Okay, what I might do now is just collapse all these folders so everything's a bit neater. So if you hold down Control Alt or Command Option and click on any folder arrow and release the keys, your folders are collapsed. So we'll go back inside this folder here, Watercolor Reveal Layers, and let's just quickly go over these adjustment layers above the 3 watercolor reveal layers. So I've added an adjust watercolor brightness layer to each one of the reveal layers. This allows you to manually adjust the brightness for that area that you revealed. So by default, on this first watercolor reveal layer, I've just made it a little bit brighter, so you can see that there. Okay, so you can go inside here and adjust these handles and get a look that you prefer. Okay, now this one here, show hidden details. Sometimes when you're brushing you're brushing, this layer can help sort of bring back some of the original details to help with the overall definition. So you can see as I turn that on and off there. On some photos this has more an effect. This one doesn't really have too much effect. It's just sort of attacking that frame there. This second layer below, it's not really doing much. Okay, so again I've got this adjustment layer, the levels, so I can adjust the brightness of this one, so maybe make that a bit brighter. And this bottom one here, I haven't really revealed too much on this layer, but, so what I might do, I'll just hit Y again, and I'm just going to start brushing. Let's reveal more of the watercolor down here. Alright, might add a bit more here. Alright, I might right click and just grab this smudge brush, smudge that around a bit. Okay, now what you can also do is smudge these masks if you want. So what I'll just hide these two layers at the moment. So if we go back inside this mask, holding down Alt and click on the mask. So what I can do is if I hit B, grab one of these smudge brushes, I like to use this one for the mask. I can sort of brush away and that will sort of create less of a hard edge between the black and white areas. So if I go into see how this is looking, so when I start brushing, you'll see how it's creating more of a smooth edge around the edge of the textures there. So this is a good way to add maybe a bit more realism to it. So yeah, feel free to do that. So a few other things you can experiment with these masks is if you double click on one of these masks, you can lower the density of this layer. So that's basically the overall visibility of this mask. So if I drag this to 0%, that's the equivalent of the mask being turned off. So you can see how it's pretty much gone to fully white. Okay, so anything that you brush now with Y onto this isn't restricted by the mask. But if I say increase this to 50%, it has, so if I go inside this mask now, you can see how before it was, you know, solid black, now it's a grey tone. So if we increase this, you'll see it gets darker. So the mask has more of an effect, okay? You can also just shift click on these masks and that will just disable it altogether. So I like to quickly experiment with that. So I might just disable this mask on the second watercolor reveal layer to see what kind of look that has, okay? What I might do is I might just quickly brush, let's turn this area down, might fill in more of this here. Okay, I can see sort of this white texture at the top here, so I might look at this mask to see if it's coming from here, so you can see that there. So what I might do is I've included a brush that I like to use for the mask. So if you hit B, right click, this brush here under the reveal brushes folder, I like to use this one for the mask. So if you select this one, and if I brush with white, so hitting X, that will flip between black and white. So white is my active color. I can start brushing over this now, and that will just remove that bit of grit that was showing in the watercolor here. Now, an important thing to note about these watercolor reveal layers here is that if you have closed your Photoshop file, then reopen it, and then go to brush on these three purple layers again, you'll get an error, okay? So I've included this action. So if you twirl open the actions panel, this action here, it's just called run this action if you have reopened or resized your document. So if you've closed your Photoshop file, reopened it, or resized your document, you have to run this action again. Okay, so all you need to do is click play on it, and this is just a message explaining about why you need to do this. So click continue. This won't pop up if you have closed and reopened your file. So if you do get it, just click OK, just click yes here. Okay, and this will allow you to continue to keep brushing to reveal your watercolor using this brush here. Okay, so that's an important thing to remember. That's why I've just added it here. And these two actions here, these are just instructions if you forget how to reveal your watercolor. just press play on this action, and there are just the 4 steps at the top there with some tips, and just some instructions with how to smudge your textures again if you forget. Now, another thing to note about the watercolor reveal layers is that I've left their effects still applied to these layers. So you can see that I've applied an inner glow. So if I turn this off, you can see the effect there. And there's also a texture that's been overlaid. So let's go and just double click on these and have a look. So you can see that I've applied now one of these textures, and these are coming from the patterns that you imported, okay? So you can see that there. Now if I increase the opacity here, you can see that what that's doing there. So I've kept that around, I think it was 50%. You can also adjust the angle and the scale of the texture. This is a seamless texture, so no matter how small you make it, it won't have really definable hard edges. Okay, and I've also applied an inner glow. So you can, this sort of gives a darker appearance to the edge of the texture. So you can adjust the opacity there, so you can see that around the frame as I increase and decrease that. So you can play around with that. Adjust the range, that can also have quite an effect, and you can also play around with the contour as well. Okay, so that's those same effects have been applied to all 3 of those layers there. So next, let's take a look at the edge definition folder here. So if I turn that on and off, you can see what that's doing. So what I might do is actually just hide this line art folder for the moment so I can more clearly see what's going on. So the layers inside this folder can help bring out more definition in your watercolor. So let's go down one by one here. So the first one here is edge lines. So you can see if I turn it on and off, you can see what that's doing. Now I've applied just a clouds filter to the mask, so it sort of breaks up the texture a little bit, so it appears, the line art will appear more prominent in sections and less prominent in others. So if I disable this mask, hold down Shift, you can see that there, if I turn it on and off. And also be aware that the default opacity that I've set it to is 50%. So if I increase that to 100, you can see how there's much more definable lines around areas of your image. So I'll just put that back to 50%. So this one here is where you can control the darkness of your edges. So if you just double click on this, this is just a levels adjustment layer. But if you just grab, say, this middle handle here and drag this to the right, you'll see how it gets much darker around sort of the edges of things in your image. So play around with that. You can also make it lighter if you want. It's up to you. Okay. And this one here is outside edge darkness. So if I go inside the mask of this layer, you can see this levels adjustment layer is going to target, is only going to lighten or darken the areas that are in white and grey and avoid black. But the layer below will basically do the opposite. It will do everywhere in white and avoid black. So this way I can control the brightness of everywhere outside of the edges specifically. So playing around with those two to get a look that you like. So this is another way to increase the opacity of basically bring out more definition, is that, and what you want to do here is just adjust the opacity of this layer. I've got in brackets here opacity, also on this layer here. That's just to remind you to experiment with that layer through its opacity. So if I go to this one here, Shadow Detail 2, you can see the default opacity is at 10%. So I can just click on this word here, opacity, click, hold and drag to the right, and you see as I increase that, it's getting much darker. Okay, bring it to 0. So yeah, adjust that one. Now this one here, it is an empty layer, and you see inside the mask here, it will be focusing on these areas in white. And I've just called this layer Edge Reveal, and I've got in brackets here, use the Edge Reveal brush. So if you hit B, then right click to access the brushes panel. This brush here is the Edge Reveal brush. It's a little brush, and when you start brushing, this will specifically target the edges, the prominent edges in your picture. Okay, So what I might do is I'll turn these off and start brushing again. So you can just sort of faintly see that revealing sort of some edge definition. Okay, so that's the reason why it's so subtle is that it's only going to appear in those areas in white. Okay, so depending on your photo, there might be a lot more areas in white. Okay, so these are good layers and to quickly check out, adjust their opacity, adjust their settings to really help bring out as much detail as you want in your watercolor. And also don't forget that you can control the appearance of where you want this edge definition to appear through the mask. So if I turn this folder off completely, let's just say that I wanted no edge definition around these 3 frames here. Well, what I could do is just select the mask on this folder, hit B, right click, and grab this mask brush here. Now, I want to brush black to remove the visibility of what's inside this folder. So I'll select that mask there, hit X, make sure black is the active color. Now when I start brushing here, I can remove that definition. Okay. So what I like to do is just, quickly hold down Shift on these layers to disable the mask to see what kind of influence that has, or I'll turn the folder off, on and off completely to see, I'll scan around to see if there's an area that looks quite nice without that edge definition, and I'll just brush that away. So these 4 layers in grey, these are just some overall adjustment layers to affect the overall sort of brightness, contrast, and color vibrance of your watercolor. So for example, you just double click on the overall levels here, and this will just adjust the overall brightness. The overall curves, this gives you a little bit more control over sort of the brightness and contrast in your watercolor. So down the bottom here, this will attack more of the shadows. So if I drag this point up, this will brighten up the shadows, make them darker, and then midtones more towards the middle here. And then you can focus on the highlights here. Okay, but let's just undo that. So overall color vibrance, so just be aware that by default I've boosted up the color vibrance quite a bit. So that's pretty much the default there, and I've had it set to somewhere around here. You can also adjust the saturation as well if you want to boost those colors up a bit more. The overall brightness and contrast, I have by default increased the contrast as well, so you can experiment with that. Also, if you use Legacy, that uses a different type of way to add contrast. Okay. So next, let's take a look at the line art folder. So by default, this is on, and you'll notice that while you're revealing your watercolor, that this crosshatch texture will appear in the darker areas of your watercolor. So let's go inside this folder and see how that works. So this top layer here, lines pattern, I've got in brackets here, change. This is the crosshatch pattern, so you can see that there. So if you double click on this lines pattern, okay, this brings up the pattern fill window, and I've just added a few different options for some sort of some line art that you can choose from. So there's a messy one there, but I think by default it was this one here. You can adjust the angle and also adjust the scale. So you can see as I scale that up, that texture is getting much bigger. And again, these are seamless textures, so they won't have any hard edges. So sort of the more you scale them down. Okay. Now, one thing to note about how I've done this is that, yeah, like I said, it will only appear in the darker areas of your image, and that is done if you double click on the layer. That is done down the bottom here through this blend if section. So you can see that I've restricted this crosshatch pattern, or whatever pattern you pick, to only appear in this color range here, between these markers here, so the black, to around here. So in this sort of tonal range here, that's where it'll appear. But if I grab this handle here and drag them both to the right, that is going to pretty much fill up your entire watercolor, because it's saying that, okay, look at all the layers below and appear within this tonal range. But as I grab these handles and drag it to the left, you can see how it is only now appearing within sort of this tonal range. Now, if you want to create more of a smoother transition between, where it ends, just hold down Alt or Option to split these markers apart, sort of drag them around. You can see how that's created a much smoother transition. So that's how that is done. If you're wondering why the crosshatch is only appearing in darker areas, you can just mess around with these. You can also grab these handles and move it away so that it doesn't appear within such a dark area of your watercolor. Okay, so there are a few line art layers. So these are the layers in blue that are the line art, and I've just added these adjustment layers here, which are just called line weight. So what I might do, I might just turn off all these and zoom in a bit so we can see. So if you look around this cabinet here, if I double click on this adjustment layer, it's just a levels adjustment layer. If I drag this to the right, you can see the line weight gets much heavier. Okay, I drag it to the left. So by default, I've got them all up pretty high, so they're quite thin. So you can jump into those and adjust those if you want. Okay, turn these back on. And one thing to note about this line art folder is that the appearance is restricted to, I've got a mask applied to this folder. So if I hold down Alt or Option, click on the mask, you can see that the line art won't appear in these black areas. So I've got in brackets here, move mask or disable. So if I select this mask and hit V, access the move tool, I can move this mask around, and that will sort of create a bit more randomness to the area of where those lines will appear. Or you can just disable it by holding down Shift, clicking on the mask, excuse me, so that the lines will appear everywhere. So one thing to note about these, about the line art, is if I turn off the watercolor reveal layers and this edge definition, you notice that there's no sketch lines. But if I turn these folders on, you notice that they appear. Okay, now that is because if you notice on these blue layers here, if I double click on any of these, you can see that using this blend if method again, the line art will only appear within this tonal range. It won't appear in pure white. So that is because when you start revealing your watercolor, basically the line art will only appear where you reveal your watercolor, and it won't appear in pure white areas. Okay, so if you want to change that, you can just go into these one by one if you want, and just drag this to the right. Okay, and that will then the line art will appear in basically everywhere. So I'll do that for this one in here as well. So you can see the line art then appears here. Okay, so just be aware of that. Something else you could try is moving this folder to the top. Okay, so then all the line art will appear basically everywhere. Okay, so a few other things you can experiment with these lines is, let's just say, I'll just turn off these ones. I'll just disable this mask. Okay, what you can do is basically just move it, move this one around, just hide that, move that one around to offset it a bit, add a bit more randomness to it, or you can do something like go edit, transform, you can go warp, so you can sort of just click around different areas here, and that's create more of a, just another way to offset those lines. You can go Control T, you can rotate them, do whatever you want. Hit Control, select both of those, or hit Control or Command J to duplicate it. Okay, that should add a bit more weight if you want, and you can offset that duplicated copy if you want. Yeah, create more of a random look there. So you can do that with any of those. You can also adjust the overall opacity of these lines as well if you want. You can just select the folder, and if I just hit, say, 5 on the keyboard, that will adjust that folder's opacity to 50%. So you could just add just a subtle hint of sort of some line art if you want, so around 30%. Okay, the final two layers at the top here, paper texture and paper color. So paper texture is just a pattern So if you click on this, there's this pattern here at the start. So the scale is pretty low, so you can adjust that if you want. The opacity is also at 25%, so you can increase that to 100% if you want to make that a bit more prominent. And the paper color, this is where you want to adjust your paper color. So you can just grab a new tone here, and that will apply color. Alright, so what I might do now is just go over this and make some adjustments. So I might increase this liner opacity again, and what I might do is I will enable that mask because I don't mind it just appearing in that area. And what I might do, I'll go down into these layers and I might hit Y or access the reveal brush here, and I might just start revealing more of this. Okay, I'll hit B, I can grab this smudge brush, and if I want to sort of smudge that around. Okay, I'll go down to the layer below, hit Y, and I might fill in more of this chair. I'll bring this area down a bit, and I'll brush here as well. Might check out the opacity, the brightness of this again. That's good. Might check out, turn off the lines. I might turn off that crosshatch pattern. Go inside the edge definition. I'll take another look at this. Next, I might grab this soft blend brush here and might just blend this bit here. So you can see as I'm brushing away, it's quite a smooth transition. Okay, and I might just brush over this area again. So grabbing this brush, I'll use quite a small, so using the left square bracket, I'm using quite a small brush. I'll turn this area down, and I might just brush over this area here a bit more. And I've grabbed one of these smudge brushes and just smudge this around a bit. Alright, so lastly I will show you how to create a transparent background. So if you want to export this with a transparent background instead of just a solid white background, I'll show you what to do. So firstly, just delete the mask on the master watercolor sketch folder here. So just right click and go delete layer mask. And so what you want to do is that we want to select our watercolor reveal layers. So if you hold down Control or Command, select the first one, then hold down Control Command Shift. You want to select these additional two layers. Okay, so you can see this is all the area that we revealed. Okay, so what you want to do is with the watercolor sketch folder selected, just hit the layer mask button here. Okay, and you want to hide your background layer here. And so now everything is sitting on a transparent background. So you can see the transparency around the back here. And if you hold down Alt or Option and click on that mask to have a look, you can see that everywhere in black is transparent and white is visible. So if you wanted to have all this area be not transparent, what you can do is just hit B, right click, grab this mask here, this brush, sorry, and make sure white is the active color. So hit X, and you can start brushing anywhere where you don't want to have transparency. Okay. Alright, so that concludes this tutorial. I'll put a link down to where you can download this tool below. I'll also put a link down to my support page if you're having any issues with it, and also some links to some other Photoshop effects that you might like. Alright, I'll see you in the next tutorial.